Hi everybody, the best lesson that we learned in the last, let's say, couple of weeks is that America love to tax poor people and love wars for the rich people. That's what the story is right now. That's the great message that we get. And America, for as far as concerns the war, create packages, freedom packages, as Jon Stewart showed us last night. I will give you some of the flash about that shortly. I cannot show you the entire video because of copyright issue, but definitely I will show you the video of Rachel Maddow attached at the end of this, talking about how the Republican governor have plans to tax the poor people their ass off. So to create the big government, as I always said, at state level, limiting freedom to people and taxing them like crazy. But they complain about Obama and the federal government, which actually cut tax to everybody, which is kind of weird. But let's go step by step. Every president in the United States practically had a war. You can make the list of everyone. As soon as you got this role of president, you are in war with someone. Everybody make big announcement. At least the cool part about Obama is that he's going actually not to lead this one, and more in the next days, America will be just not the main actor in this. But still, America love to give freedom packages and give weird names to their actions, like Odyssey Down, that looks like a Yes album, for instance. So America decides for you. You have the ambivalence package if you are a country like Sudan and so on, in which there are no specific American interests inside, but definitely there is a support from the America, with some money, with a lot of discussion, and with friendship and so on, but not real military actions, you know, remember Darfur or other stuff like that. There are no real American interests there. So you have with the ambivalence package, you also have access to Bono, Sean Penn, Angelina Jolie, and Clooney, and all the people that have movies with Clooney. Then you have the silver package, for instance, like Egypt, in which there is no invasion, there is no troops there, big support, we listen, we give kind of a vague support, but definitely we want to help you and be with you, but in a more stronger way, because there are more interest in that area, and the dictators that we support before, now they are not loved, so we have to change. And finally, the platinum package, the package that allows you to go to Iraq with the full invasion, you destroy everything, schools and so on, to rebuild them, the famous shock doctrine, to rebuild from scratch, ignoring the past, and so on. This is what's happening, and you have parts of this one also in Libya right now. But the allies are selling more than us this package. But remember, all these packages have to be taken with precaution, so read the instructions. And now let's talk a little bit more about how the Republican governor want to fuck the poor people. So the war is good for the rich, and for the poor, it's good having more and more taxes.
This is Scott Fitzgerald. He's a Republican. He's the leader of the state Senate in Wisconsin. This is Scott's brother, Jeff. Jeff is leader of the state assembly in Wisconsin. And this is Jeff and Scott's dad, Stephen. Stephen used to be the U.S. Marshal for the Western District of Wisconsin, but when his term expired last year, he ran for a local sheriff gig and lost, which was particularly embarrassing because it was his old job. Previously been that sheriff, but he lost election to get that job back by a lot, 2-1. Ow. So Stephen is rather embarrassed and he's jobless after that, but he's also the dad of the guy who runs the state assembly and the dad of the guy who runs the state senate. So with friends in high places and the Republican governor, Scott Walker, Mr. Walker found a spot for him, appointing him to lead the Wisconsin State Patrol. You may have seen a piece on this in Talking Points memo last week. The Fond du Lac Reporter, a newspaper in Wisconsin, pointed out that Papa Fitzgerald got that sweet job from Governor Walker, even though he was the only finalist for the gig who came from outside the ranks of the Wisconsin State Patrol itself. But you know, that's how it is in Wisconsin. Scott Fitzgerald leading the Senate, Jeff Fitzgerald leading the Assembly, and Stephen Fitzgerald leading the Wisconsin State Patrol, which I'm sure came in handy when the governor and the Fitzgerald brothers wanted to threaten to use the State Patrol for political purposes to go arrest and round up Wisconsin's Democrats who'd fled the state to stop the Republicans' union stripping. That Republican union stripping measure in Wisconsin is still a nationally galvanizing force for Democrats. Support and enthusiasm among the Democratic base still continues to build for pinning this union stripping thing on the Republican Party nationally and for recalling Republicans in Wisconsin who pushed it through. And it is in the midst of that effort into which another patronage hiring scandal appears to be blossoming today. Started actually a little bit more than a week ago when protesters showed up at the home of one of the Republican state senators who's facing a recall. His name is Randy Hopper, State Senator Randy Hopper, and there was this strange detail in the local coverage of that protest at his house. People who were mad about the union stripping thing and wanted to protest it showed up at Randy Hopper's house, and his wife came out of the house to address the protesters and told them that Senator Hopper no longer lived there. In fact, she said he no longer lived in his district at all. He no longer lived in Fond du Lac. She told the protesters that Senator Hopper had left his Senate district and now lives primarily in Madison with his 20-something mistress. Today, Wisconsin papers are all aflutter with news that despite Wisconsin's alleged terrible budget crisis, Republican Senator Randy Hopper's alleged girlfriend was able to land a sweet job in the Walker administration, getting what will amount to a $12,000 annualized pay raise over the person who had the job before her. Senator Hopper says he had nothing to do with her getting that job. He also says he's not living with her no matter what his wife says. But apart from the awkwardness for the state senator in question here, there's also the big policy awkwardness of whether or not Wisconsin state government is so broke because of all those greedy state employees, right? I mean, for the senator already facing the likely prospect of recall, this is not a positive development. But it is also really handy as a reminder about the whole nature of this fight in Wisconsin and why it is resonating nationally. The Republican justification for the union stripping business in Wisconsin was that it was all about the budget, right? But then something like this comes along and we are all reminded that if it were all about the budget, people hired by the state would not be getting $12,000 raises, whether or not they were state senators' girlfriends. And you see this writ large in the policy Republicans are pursuing. Not everybody is taking a hit financially in these states that are pleading poverty. And this is important. These Republican governors and Republican legislatures all over the country keep saying that they're broke. They keep saying it's about the budget, it's about the budget, it's about the budget. But they are being incredibly generous to some with their budgets. Whether it's state senators' girlfriends or the forces in our society to whom they would like to redirect what are now public assets, there are some people who are making out like bandits toward whom states pleading poverty are being incredibly generously profligate. In Maine, for example, the Republican governor there wants to spend $30 million giving a tax cut to about 550 individuals, 550 of the state's millionaires. In Ohio, House Republicans say they want to spend $10 million to give the petroleum industry in their state a tax break. Pennsylvania's Republican governor wants to spend big on business as well. His tax proposals have been estimated to cost the state between $200 and $833 million. Remember, he's pleading poverty. New Jersey's Republican Governor Chris Christie wants to spend $200 million on tax cuts to business. Remember, we're broke. Not to be outdone, Florida's Republican governor wants to spend $1.5 billion on tax cuts for corporations. Michigan's Republican governor wants to spend $1.8 billion on business tax cuts. And of course, in Wisconsin, Republican Governor Scott Walker, his giveaways to business, his first actions as governor, are projected to cost the great state of Wisconsin nearly $140 million. And remember, we're broke. This is some spectacular generosity towards some very specific parts of society among these governments that are pleading poverty, complaining about giant state budget deficits. And states do have budget deficits. But all of these giveaways I just described are things that will make those deficits worse. All the Beltway media reporting on the fight in the states is about how governors are making hard choices and taking controversial steps to close their budget deficits. But all of these things they are doing open budget deficits wider. They make the budget problems in all these states worse, and they bend over backwards to do it. The people who are not benefiting from Republican generosity in the states, they're the ones facing cuts. In Georgia, the legislature looking at cutting funding to the state's university system by about $75 million. Pennsylvania's Republican governor proposing a more than 50% cut to that state's higher education system. In New Jersey and South Carolina, Republican governors want to drastically cut Medicaid benefits. In Arizona, the Republican governor's budget would get rid of health care for 100,000 poor people. Just in case anybody even tries to make a case that this is all ideological, this is just about Republican opposition to taxes and opposition to spending, consider that in most of these states, not only are Republican governors or legislatures trying to cut things like education and social services, they are also overtly raising taxes on poor people. We've got tax hikes on the elderly and on low-income residents in Michigan. Also, Republicans in Kansas and in Wisconsin are talking about effectively raising taxes on the working poor. In Georgia, House Republicans are talking about raising taxes on groceries. Also, they're talking about ending a tax break for blind people. That's up for grabs in Georgia right now. Raising taxes on the blind. And just to spread the pain around, in Maine, the Republican governor's proposed budget would raise property taxes for the middle class. This is not some sort of policy doublespeak, right? This is Republicans proposing tax increases. I keep hearing that what Republicans are doing in the states is about closing the budget gaps. When you give away hundreds of millions of dollars to businesses, when you give those away as state revenues, that makes your budget problem worse, not better. And every time the national media reports these states that are giving these huge tax giveaways to businesses as closing the budget gap, they are wrong. Every time we hear that this is an ideological opposition to taxes among these Republican governors and legislatures, you gotta ask what you believe about tax cuts, tax increases for poor people. Are tax increases for poor people also tax hikes? Huge tax cuts for the people in this country who are already wealthy, and tax increases on the poor and the unemployed.